Coming up on today's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast, we'll go over some roster moves that the Raiders made on Tuesday, brag about the incredible seasons that both Maxx Crosby and Josh Jacobs are having, plus another former Raider is on the move. We'll take a look at some of the players getting a lot of burn as of late, what that means moving forward. Your calls and texts will close things out on a Locked and Loaded Wednesday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast, November 30th, 2022.
Just win. Just win. Just win. Just win.
The autumn wind is a raider, pillaging just for fun. He'll knock you round and upside down and laugh when he's conquered and won. And won. And won. And won. And won.
And welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen each and every day. Remember, you can find the Locked On Raider podcast free and available on all platforms. Plenty to get to on today's show. Very excited about it, so we're going to try to get as much in a short amount of time as you know we have here on the Locked On Raiders podcast. Off top, want to definitely jump into some Raider roster moves. The Raiders signed cornerback Tyler Hall to the active roster and placed Anthony Averett on IR for the second time this season. What does that mean? Anthony Averett is officially done for the Raiders in 2022. He played all of 4 games and had 1 pass defense. Remember, he was a free agent that the Raiders signed from Baltimore. He stepped up when Baltimore had a lot of guys injured back in 2021 and played pretty well. So a lot of folks thought he was going to contribute and be a guy that Patrick Graham could lean on in that cornerback room, be a guy that could play that press man coverage. It just never panned out. He started the season on IR. Now he's going to end the season on IR. He went out of the game on Sunday with a toe injury, and that's a done deal record for Anthony Averett for the 2022 season and most likely for his Raiders career. He played in 4 games, as I mentioned, had 1 pass defense, and really got burned a lot this season when he was in the game. He got a 1-year, $4 million contract, $3.3 million fully guaranteed. Not that it's about the money, but just breaking it down on what Anthony Averett got from the Silver and Black. But shout out to Tyler Hall. Remember, he was the guy that was signed to the active roster, was elevated from the practice squad, on that Saturday right before the Denver Bronco game, went into that game, got a sack, and played quite a bit on the game on Sunday against the Seahawks. And we'll actually get into that more in segment number 2. But he's a guy that's earned some more playing time as far as the Raiders are concerned. So look out for Tyler Hall, cornerback, who has been elevated to the active roster as Anthony Averett is on season-ending IR. Now, I mentioned I wanted to brag about Maxx Crosby and Josh Jacobs and the seasons that they're having. Not that we haven't done a lot of that already on the show, but man, I'm just telling you, every time I get to see some stats or some numbers or, some facts about both these guys, it just blows my mind what they're doing for the Raiders in 2022. Let's start off with Maxx Crosby. We talked a lot of Josh Jacobs. We'll get to him next. Let's start with Mad Maxx. Through 11 games, and this is from Raiders PR, through 11 games, Maxx Crosby has recorded 67 tackles, 10.5 sacks, 17 tackles for loss, 22 quarterback hits, 2 forced fumbles, 2 pass defense, and 1 fumble recovery. Mad Maxx, that's what he's done from the defensive end position. While most of these games he's been playing 100% of the snaps, he's not coming out. He's just that guy where his engine just goes, and goes. Again, from Raiders PR, Mad Maxx leads the NFL in tackles for loss with 17. Leads all NFL defensive linemen with 67 total tackles. He's 4th in the NFL right now with 10.5 sacks and 3rd in the NFL with 60 tackles for loss since 2019. Now, I would say if the Raiders were doing better than 4-7, their overall record, I would say he's in the running for Defensive Player of the Year. He won't get it with the Raiders only having 4 wins. Who knows how they end the season? Maybe if they go on some crazy run like they did at the end of 2021, maybe he'll be in that conversation. But a hell of a season nonetheless for Mad Maxx Crosby. Again, a guy who got paid and went out there and showed why the Silver and Black paid him. So hats off to Maxx Crosby for what he's been able to do. Now, I did mention Josh Jacobs and what he's been doing. And of course, we've been talking a lot about him lately, and how could you not, especially after the performance he put up on Sunday against the Seahawks. But check this out. This is from Josh DeBow from the AP, and we know anytime it's a Josh DeBow stat, normally it's negative. This one is not, so it really caught my attention. Again, it's about Josh Jacobs. Jacobs, most first down rushing and receiving this season. Josh Jacobs is at 80 for the season. He's been responsible for 80 first downs, both on the ground and receiving the ball. The next person that's closest to him, Tyreek Hill, the Dolphins, 58. That is one hell of a difference, 80 to 58. Behind Hill is Christian McCaffrey with 57, Travis Kelce of the Chiefs with 57, and Aaron Jones of the Packers with 57. So you see what's all kind of similar? The 50s. You know what's not similar? 80 through 11 games, 80 first downs Josh Jacobs is responsible for. Josh DeBow goes on to say, Jacobs' 80 first downs so far this season are most for any Raider player since Lamont Jordan had 86 in 2005. That was the whole season he had 86. Josh Jacobs is at 80 through 11 games. Only other Raider with more in a season since 91 was Charlie Garner with 91 in 2002. So back in 2002, Charlie Garner had 11 more first downs than Josh Jacobs has right now. And again, that's through 16 games. Josh Jacobs is at 80 through 11. Give the man his flowers. That's all I got to say. Give the man his flowers. And oh, by the way, give the man his contract. I mentioned also that a former Raider is on the move again. Jonathan Abram, the former first-round pick of the Silver and Black, who the Raiders waived just a couple weeks ago, latched on with the Packers immediately. He's been waived by the Green Bay Packers. He had 1 tackle in 2 games for Green Bay. And, by the way, he got blasted in the media by Rich Bisaccia, who's a special teams coach there in Green Bay. Obviously, former coach with the Raiders, but blasted him for a couple dumb penalties. He got his first game out there on special teams with Green Bay, but I don't think that Jonathan Abrams is going to be unemployed much longer because he did have multiple teams that put in claims for him when the Packers was awarded him. So someone will probably pick him up this afternoon or whatever. It's kind of the nature of the beast, but sticking with the team is very, very difficult. It just shows how hard it is as Jonathan Abram now has been waived for the second time in 2022. That's all I got for you for segment number 1 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Kind of news and notes of the day. We will be meeting with head coach Josh McDaniels at the Intermountain Healthcare Performance Center, Raiders HQ, around 12:15 this afternoon. So be able to get a little bit of injury update, how Andrew Billings is doing. Is Nate Hobbs a guy that's expected to play this weekend? And start to turn the page to the LA Chargers. That's coming up later on this afternoon at the Intermountain Healthcare Performance Center. Coming up in segment number 2, props to players who are getting the majority of the snaps. So what I mean by that, kind of break down a little bit of the snap count, hear a little bit from Brad Spielberger from Pro Football Focus, what that means, and what's also stood out to me about some guys that weren't getting burned early in the season that are getting burned now, and guys that were getting burned that aren't getting that much as of now. We'll do that all coming up in segment number 2. Before we get to that, though, do want to tell you about a couple great sponsors, including Turo. And Turo is the world's largest car sharing marketplace. With Turo, you can book any car you want, wherever you want it, from a community of local hosts. Browse a huge selection of vehicles for just about any occasion or budget across the U.S., UK, Canada, and Australia. What can you do? Well, you can book a huge selection, a spacious SUV or minivan from a family road trip. Get a classic or luxury car for a special event, birthday, or holiday. You can find affordable economy cars if you're on a budget. Just need to get from A to B, that's fine. Or maybe even you want to test that electrical vehicle out. You could do that as well. Many Turo hosts can even deliver the car right to you. Every single trip is backed by liability insurance. Terms, conditions, exclusions apply. Forget boring rental cars. Find your drive at Turo.com. I also want to tell you about Audible. Audible is releasing a slate of new football podcasts that we're sure you're going to love. Find Block Forever Now wherever you get your podcast. And I'm sure you're wondering, what is Block Forever Now? It's a brand new podcast from former NFL All-Pro Ryan Khalil and Audible. He'll take you the conversation about football to the next level. Gives football fans and insiders look at the game through the eyes of the greatest players and personalities of all time. He'll sit down with star players, coaches, former pros across the league to get the real about what happens on the field, behind the scenes, in the locker room, team meetings, at the hotel, on the road, whatever the case may be. He's going to take you there. You'll hear from Christian McCaffrey, Juju Smith-Schuster, and a whole lot more. New episodes of Block Forever will be recorded and released every single week ahead of Thursday Night Football. And guests discuss topics like the player's psyche, sports betting, playing through pain, being a leader, and a whole lot more. Catch the full Block Forever series available anywhere you get your podcast. Available everywhere now. Audible. Get in the game. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Really want to give some props to some players that I felt like have been stepping up in a major way. And off top, really got to start with the offensive line. And why do I bring this up? Because the starting 5 for the offensive line for the Raiders on Sunday played 100% of the snaps. And I think that that's a big deal since we know all season long it's been a rotation of guys, mixing this guy, bringing this right tackle, bringing that right tackle, bringing this guy in at guard, move this guy. I mean, there's been such a rotating offensive line. I can't stand it because that's not how you build continuity. And, of course, they're trying to find the right guys that fit. And as Lincoln Kennedy tells me all the time, the biggest problem is that you can't really tell who the best 5 offensive linemen are in practice because the practices aren't like they used to be, where you used to have the full contact and guys actually being able to block each other. So it's real difficult to figure out who is who until you're in the game game settings. So the Raiders have been flirting with this rotation, and it, in my opinion, hasn't really worked out that well. But as of late, all of a sudden, they look like they're onto something. Of course, against Denver, Colton Miller was out, and Jermaine Illuminor filled in at that left tackle position with Thayer Munford kicking to the right tackle spot. But Colton Miller was back on Sunday versus Seattle. Miller, Parham, James, Bars, Illuminor. That was the starting five. They all played 100% of the snaps. 77 total snaps. They played 100%, and Bars was the highest graded offensive lineman by Pro Football Focus at 74.9. Now, you're wondering about Thayer Munford. He did come in as a sixth offensive lineman for 7 snaps when they have that jumbo package. And Lincoln Kennedy told me when we did the Raiders Roundtable on Tuesday, he was talking to myself and JT the Brick, and he said he's basically a glorified tight end right now. Right? He's an extra tight end. He's not a guy that's going to go in there and catch any passes, but he's a guy that goes in there for blocking purposes. So he's that sixth offensive lineman. It's the jumbo package. But again, looking at that starting five, knowing that they did a really good job in Seattle, really helped keep Derek Carr clean, giving him opportunities to throw the ball, and of course, opened up big holes for Josh Jacobs to go and do what he did as he had 303 scrimmage yards, 229 of those on the ground. So you got to give them a lot of credit. On Tuesday on Raider Nation Radio 920, Unnecessary Roughness, my radio show, I had Brad Spielberger from Pro Football Focus on, and we talked about multiple areas of the team, including the Raiders offensive line, and if he's seeing this version of them improving throughout the season, and particularly what he saw on Sunday against Seattle with the 5 that played 100% of the snaps.
They did well. Colton Miller has continued his great season. He's got an 81 grade on the year, 81 grade for this past week, and Dylan Parham had a really good game as well. I think you're seeing him stack some quality performances. You know, of course, the young guard had a 75 grade in this game as a pass protector. They've been maligned. I had low expectations for them. There have been some moments. They've obviously had to shuffle things around at right tackle a little bit, but they've been pretty solid, all across the board.
So there's Brad Spielberger right there, Pro Football Focus, talking about the Raiders' offensive line and their improvement. Be interesting to see what they do this week as Khalil Mack is coming to town, and Joey Bosa is not going to be his tag team partner this week as he was in week 1, but still, Khalil Mack is a guy that can wreck a game. So interested to see how that offensive line, this version of the offensive line, holds up, and if they're able to play 100% of the snaps again. If they can, that's a positive moving forward, in my opinion. Now, of course, the man of the hour, the guy who made it happen, the guy who's going to get talked about quite a bit, Josh Jacobs, he played 61 snaps. That's 79% of the game. And we know that there wasn't many snaps that he wasn't in there, right? We know Zamir White got a couple carries here and there. Amir Abdullah had a couple plays here and there, caught a couple passes out of the backfield. But for the most part, it was the Josh Jacobs show, and his Pro Football Focus grade was 89.2. So here's Brad Spielberger talking about Josh Jacobs, not just the game he had, but also the season he's been having.
Yeah, he's having an incredible season. I think he might be the biggest benefactor of a team not picking up his fifth-year option. He's our highest-graded running back in the entire season. 93.4 rushing grade is up there with the best rushing seasons, across the board. So he's been phenomenal, forcing a ton of missed tackles, which obviously, he can control more than maybe the offensive line is creating huge holes. So he's winning in every way imaginable, and that game was incredible.
So that was some good stuff right there from Brad Spielberger from Pro Football Focus just on Josh Jacobs. But Spielberger also works for OverTheCap.com. He contributes to them, and I know that we just had Michael Giannitti on from Spotrac.com. But since he was on the radio show, I thought, you know what? Let me go ahead and start talking about the free agent class and running backs. Let's talk a little bit about what a potential contract could look like for Josh Jacobs, because obviously that's something that Raider Nation is very interested in to see how it's all going to play out. So here's Spielberger on the running back free agent class and then contract scenarios, a couple follow-ups from me from my radio show on Tuesday.
Yeah, so here's the thing is that I think this might be the best free agent class at running back that I can remember. I mean, Jacobs, of course, at the top of that list, but Saquon Barkley, Kareem Hunt, David Montgomery, Miles Sanders in Philadelphia. Those are just some of the big marquee names. And so I wonder if it's such a buyer's market, does that maybe suppress the contract down a little bit? I think he'll join potentially that 12 to 13 million per year range. Guys like Joe Mixon, Derrick Henry, Aaron Jones, kind of in that category. He could surpass that a little bit, but he's been phenomenal this season.
No, he really has. And, we were talking about him in a potential contract yesterday in great detail. And even throughout the potential of the franchise tag, I know they declined the fifth-year option, but maybe they didn't know he was going to have a season like this. Do you think that the franchise tag is something that could be in play?
I think it's a risk more teams should take, too, because now, as of a couple of years ago, that fifth-year option used to be only guaranteed for injury. And so if you wanted to cut the player, provided they were healthy, of course, you could cut them with no penalty. And now it's a fully guaranteed option the day you exercise. So you can't get out of it no matter what. And so I think smart teams Look, yes, you could have paid less, and maybe fans will give you a hard time saying, oh, you wasted a couple $1 million. You didn't know you were a believer. Now you certainly do know. I think it's a smart, risk to take for some clubs. Hey, we'll pay a couple more $1 million, but we know what we have in this player. Buy ourselves some more time. I wouldn't hold against them if they said, hey, you know what, we made a mistake. Hand up, hand raised, but let's keep this guy on board as long as we can.
Yeah, I've said that multiple times. Like, a good plan is the one that can be changed, and that you can admit that, hey, you know what, that wasn't the right move. But let me ask you this about the contract and a possible contract extension. Now that the fifth year option has been declined, is there a chance where they could structure a contract extension where they throw a lot of signing bonus and a lot of different bonuses where the base salary is a lot lower than what it would be if it was like the fifth year option was in place?
I think that is where you're going to start to see more and more. And look, he's a young player. He's still only going to be, 25 this offseason. Mm-hmm. But I mentioned Aaron Jones before with the Green Bay Packers. His new deal, he almost got franchise tagged. We thought he was going to get franchise tagged, and he didn't. And they basically gave him a 2-year contract where it was largely in bonuses. And this upcoming season now, the salaries kind of spike in his third year of that deal. I think you can see a similar scenario here. Give him the payday he deserves. Give him that upfront cash flow. But in reality, no matter how long the deal actually is, make it a 2 or 3 year contract, in reality.
Flipping over to the defensive side of things as we continue to look at some of the snap counts, and thought that the interior of the Raiders defensive line did a really good job, led by Andrew Billings, who, oh, by the way, was the highest defensive lineman graded out from Pro Football Focus. 88.9 was his PFF grade. He played 28 snaps, which is 43%, 1 sack, total 1 sack, multiple tackles for loss, but he left the game early with a lower leg injury. I asked head coach Josh McDaniels about that on Monday. He said he thinks he's going to be okay, so that's something I'll definitely ask him about later on this afternoon as we got an update on Andrew Billings. But 88.9 Pro Football Focus grade from him. Jerry Tillery, who the Raiders just signed from the Chargers, 30 snaps, 46%. Bilal Nichols, 44 snaps, 68%, and a half a sack as well, going along with Andrew Billings. So I did ask Brad Spielberger what he saw from the interior part of the Raiders defensive line, because I don't think they're getting talked about enough.
Yeah, no, they've been great. Billings has an 80 grade over the last 2 weeks, had an 82 grade in this past game. And Bilal Nichols, same thing, had an 84 grade this past week, has an 80 over the last 2 weeks. He's a great player. I'm a Chicago guy, so I watched him as a young Bears player where you can move him around. They played him at nose tackle. They played him at 3-tech. They even put him opposite of tackles as a 5 technique on the edge sometimes. He doesn't do anything special. He's a little bit undersized, but he's a tenacious football player that always wants to make an impact and often does. And I think he's gotten better as the season's gone on. Going from that Bears defense to Patrick Graham's defense was a big change. It's a very different system, and I think you're seeing him get comfortable over the last couple of weeks now.
So there's Spielberger right there talking about the interior part of the Raiders defensive line. And finally, I want to get to a couple more players I wanted to give some props to. I don't even think that I have to go into what their Pro Football Focus grade was, because I think we all know they did really well, led by Maxx Crosby, Duron Harmon, Trayvon Merrick. They all played 100% of the snaps. 65 snaps they played on Sunday versus Seahawks. I think Harmon had a really good game. Trayvon Merrick, who I know has been struggling, I thought he had a really good game. And, of course, Maxx Crosby. I don't even have to speak on that, right? Maxx Crosby is that dude. Rocky Yassin from the cornerback position, 64 snaps, 98% of the snaps. Sam Webb stepped his game up. Remember, he had a rough game against Denver, battled back, played 47 snaps, came in for Anthony Averett when he went down with that toe injury. Averett didn't play a whole lot. Now he's on IR. His season's done. Sam Webb, the undrafted free agent, he's going to continue to get burned as long as he's out there doing his thing. And I asked Patrick Graham about him on Tuesday, and he said, hey, he's continuing to grow. He's always going to learn from even bad situations, going to get better and better and better. So they obviously have a lot of confidence in the young man, Sam Webb. Tyler Hall, mentioned him in segment number 1. He's been elevated to the active roster. 32 snaps. That's 49% of the snaps he played defensively on Sunday. And you know who didn't play a lot of the snaps? And I found this to be very interesting. Amik Robertson. 4 snaps defensively he played. 6% of the snaps. That is absolutely nothing for Amik, who's been a guy who's been playing quite a bit throughout the course of this year and has made some plays. Came up with an interception, came up with a scoop and score. He's had some really good tackles, had some good moments on Sunday. Maybe that was because of the mismatch with DK Metcalf. Maybe that was the case. I don't know, but only played 4 snaps. But guys like Rock, Sam Webb, Tyler Hall, all got plenty of burn. Now with Anthony Averett out, maybe Amik gets a little bit more burn, but something to pay attention to. See how many snaps, how many reps Amik Robertson gets on defense this Sunday against the Chargers. That's going to be something I'm definitely focused in on. But wanted to go ahead and give some flowers to some guys that deserved it and point out what stood out to me from the snap count, showing obviously that this regime, I've mentioned it already, in evaluation mode. They're trying to win games, but they're in evaluation mode as well. If you're not getting it done, they're going to give a young guy some burn and give him an opportunity to see what he can do. And if he continues to be successful and excel, going to continue to give him some burn. That's why you see Sam Webb and Tyler Hall, 47 snaps, 32 snaps respectfully, and a guy who started the season, Amik Robertson, 4 snaps. Again, pay attention to that this week versus the Chargers. Coming up in segment number 3, your calls and texts straight off that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Before I get to any of that, though, I do want to tell you about LinkedIn Jobs. And these days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. They'll help you find the right people for your team faster and for free. All you got to do is create a free job post on LinkedIn Jobs, add your job in the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and who you'd like to hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. Right now, LinkedIn Jobs can help you find that qualified candidate you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Here we go, Raider Nation, segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Your time to shine. Your calls and text straight off that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Before I get into that, let me go ahead and throw a disclaimer out there, and I hate that I have to do that, but if your call or text doesn't get on the show, it's nothing personal. It's nothing personal. Let me repeat it again. It's nothing personal. If your call or text doesn't get on, it's 1, I just have a bunch and I didn't get to it. I just missed it. 2, maybe the sound quality wasn't good through the phone. I don't know. There's multiple reasons why it doesn't happen, but it's never personal. I'm never looking for someone in particular, and I'm never not looking for someone in particular. So I've had plenty of people hit me up and was like, what happened? My call didn't get on. It's nothing personal. It's just a lot. I'm trying to get as many on as possible. Sometimes the length, I run out of time on the show as well. And now I've taken, the time for one call, just having to explain this. But I just want to let everyone know that it's nothing personal. It's just I run out of time and can't get everyone's calls on. With that being said, let's go ahead and go out to AB323. He's calling in to give some love to the guys in the trenches.
Hey, Q, it's AB from the 323. Just calling in. I want to show some of the big guys some love. The defensive line and the offensive line, they played pretty damn great, and especially when it mattered most. For most of the day, they kept Derek Carr clean, and I don't feel like a lot of people are giving the offensive line the love that they deserve after this big game against Seattle. Same for the defensive line. Like Chandler Jones didn't really record anything on the box sheet, but he did get some pressures, and he did recover that fumble. Maxx going crazy like always. And, some of the big guys up front, they provided some interior pressure. And I think we just need to show them some love. These group of guys are looking like they're starting to gel. I've been saying since week 1, give Josh McDaniels and the staff some time to gel. And, the team's looking good. They're looking really unbeatable right now, but definitely need to show the big guys up front some love, both on the offensive line and the defensive line. Hopefully they can continue to, fix the little things. Have a good week of practice. We got LA coming up to Las Vegas this Sunday. Hopefully our boys get the win. Let's go Raiders.
Thanks so much for the call, my man. I appreciate you, and I agree 100%. Both sides of the ball I thought did well. The offensive line, I thought that they stepped up in a major way, especially the starting 5 being able to play all 100% of the snaps, like I mentioned in segment number 2, and the defensive line. And really, in my opinion, the interior, man, the first time that they really made a big-time impact and set the tone for the game. So I can agree with you 100%. The guys in the trenches need to get some love. Thank you so much for that call. Next up, I got a lengthy text from Raider 783. It says, hey, Q, first off, compliments to the host. I've been listening for about 2 years now, frequently on my commute to the Bay Area from Fresno. You do a great job. I'm happy for you that as Raiders fans, you were able to get where you are now. Really cool. Now, I thought about weighing in a few times, especially during last year's turmoil, but you do such a good job covering things. I typically agree with you, except about Andre Holmes. Let me pause real quick. Andre Holmes is the biggest nemesis of mine. It's really funny. For anyone who doesn't know, it's not an inside joke. I just have never been a fan of Andre Holmes. He always caught the most difficult passes, and then it seemed like he dropped the other ones all the time. And I don't know who it was. One of his relatives, which is fine, would call and argue with me all the time about how great Andre Holmes was. So that's what that whole part of the text was about when it comes to Andre Holmes. All right, now let me get back to Raider 783's text. He said, we know he was a nice journeyman receiver, But for a moment in time, Holmes seemed like our only hope for a wide receiver catching a pass more than 7 yards downfield. Raiders tried squeezing the last bit of toothpaste out of James Jones, signed a 64-year-old Jordy Nelson, etc. That aside, we're all good. Again, just a funny joke about me and my love-hate relationship with Andre Holmes. All right, getting back to the text. Like you said, I've been a fan, as most of us are, of Josh Jacobs. Year 1 was great. Some injuries towards the end. Year 2, a bit of a step back, but I didn't lose much confidence in him. Year 3 started to so-so, leg injury, but he got better as the year progressed and finished really strong. And this year, he's taking it to an even higher level. Truly amazing effort and results. I thought the Texans game may have been his best, but then come the Seahawks. Jacobs is like the Maxx Crosby of the offense. Relentless effort and timely plays, even when the blocking was disrupted. But I guess everybody who watches the Raiders this year could see that. Many fans and analysts often bring up Jacobs' contract situation. And early on this year, I could have believed he was probably gone next year. Given the low value and salary practices towards modern running backs, I kind of get it. For over a month now, I've been maybe naively assuming Jacobs gets franchise tag next year. He just seems too indispensable. I'd gladly see him sign a 3 to 4 year contract, but barring that pleasant surprise, I think he gets tagged. I have the luxury of not having to pay him, but I want as many high effort, productive players like that at any position. I might be underestimating the cap issues, but I suspect they could work something out. Anyway, Q, thanks for keeping us up to speed on all things Raiders. I'll sign off as Raiders783 if that's necessary. Thank you so much for that text, my man. I appreciate you. And thanks for giving me a good laugh on Andre Holmes, man. It's a name I hadn't heard in a minute, but yeah, he was that one guy. There's always a fan favorite that is not a fan favorite for me, and Andre Holmes was always that guy. Not to try to throw dirt on his name. He did try hard. I'll give him that. He tried really hard. As far as Jacobs and the contract situation goes, I believe that they'll find a way to get it done. If they have to franchise tag him, they franchise tag him. If they're able to, front load the contract with a bunch of, like bonus money and all this other stuff and lower his base salary and give him a 3 to 4 year contract, which really ends up being about a 2-year contract because it's heavily, heavily laced with different bonuses and stuff. Something like that, I think, is going to happen. I really do. I just can't see them seeing a guy that have a season like that and watch him walk out the door. I mean, the guy's leading the league in rushing right now. The guy's responsible for 80 first downs right now, like I brought up in segment number 1. 80. The next closest guy is at 57. That's insane to me. That really is. I mean, when I had to see that, one, I couldn't believe it was from Josh DeBow because, like I said, most of the time his texts are negative or his tweets are negative in stats about the Raiders. But that's big facts right there. So you got to give him a lot of props for that. I just can't see a team allowing a guy like that to walk out the door because he means more than just a guy carrying the ball on the field, if that makes sense. But thank you for that text, my man. I do appreciate you. Got time for one more call. We'll take it from Raider OG Blackjack. He's calling to just brag a little bit about the Raiders' win versus Seattle from a guy who holds it down in the Pacific Northwest. Here he is, Raider OG Blackjack.
Hey, Q. It's your boy, Raider OG Blackjack. My first time calling. I'm calling out of the Pacific Northwest by way of Richmond, California. Hey, man, I had to call in and show my support and love and respect for you and all the services that you have provided and the love that you supported with Raider Nation. I listen to you every day. And this is my first time calling. Like I said, I just wanted to tap in after this big win and just thank the Raider Nation for giving us Raider fans some respect and dignity until the next time we play the Seahawks up here because it's lonely up here, but we deep. We real deep. And shout out to the Raider Nation that's up here supporting every week in Seahawk country. Man, we love y'all. Out.
Thank you so much for the call, my man. It's always sweet when you go on the road and get a W, right? Especially with a team that is riding pretty high. I knew they were coming off a loss to Tampa Bay when they went to Germany, but they were coming off a bye. They were tied for first place at the time in the NFC West. It was in their house. The 12s are there. The weather wasn't supposed to be good. And these boys from Vegas ain't supposed to go there and take their lunch money. And they found a way to take their lunch money. Now, it took them a little bit longer than they anticipated. It took them overtime. But to be able to get that W and, kind of silence the crowd a little bit and have Raider Nation run out of that building talking about Raiders, I mean, that had to be awesome. So keep holding it down, man. In the Pacific Northwest, we definitely appreciate you. And thanks for being a new booty caller here on the Locked On Raiders podcast. I said that was the last one, but I'll get one more text in. We'll get a text from Brent from Boston. It says, hey, Q, Brent from Boston checking in from Pat's country. Hope you had a good Thanksgiving with the fam and happy holidays. Just wanted to quickly give my thoughts on the Josh Jacobs contract situation. If I was Ziegler, I'd be making a strong offer to Jacobs and try to get something done in season. When Jacobs shuts you down because that's what his agent will make him do, despite him probably wanting to stay a Raider, I'd be sure to share the list of potential running back ones that'll be on the market next year. It's a very impressive list. They're not all on the same levels as Jacob right now, but there's a ton of talent available. You have the franchise tag in your back pocket and Zamir White sitting on the bench. I hope they get it done for all parties involved. Keep up the good work. Appreciate all you do. Just win, baby. That's Brent from Boston, and he brings up a fantastic, and I mean fantastic point. The only thing that could hamper Josh Jacobs from getting a big, fat monster contract from some team this year is exactly what Brent just brought up. And multiple guys have told me that. Brad Spielberger said it when I had him on my radio show. You know, you heard the little soundbite there in segment number 2. There are so many running backs that are going to be free agents, including Saquon Barkley, right? I mean, guys like that with some big names are going to be available. And I'm not saying all of them are going to hit the free agent market, but they're going to be available. So that may water it down a little bit where some team's not willing to give up $16 million. So maybe the going rate ends up being $12 million, $13 million. And if that's the case, I don't see why the Raiders wouldn't make that deal, especially if they, like I said, front load it, make it a 4-year contract, but really a 2-year contract and they're out of it. Kind of line them up with the rest of the contracts. Everyone else has 3-year deals, right? I mean, that's what we've been talking about, a 3-year window. You give Josh Jacobs a 4-year deal, but really you can get out of it after 2 and front load it. Boom, there you go. You're all in line with that 3-year window. Devontae's contract, Derek's contract, Hunter's contract, Waller's contract, all that kind of all lines up. I would have no problem with that. And Brent, I think that you're on to something. I think that oversaturation of all those running backs that are going to be available come the offseason may have something to do with it as well. And like you said, they do have the franchise tag if they want to use it. So there you go. That's what I got for you for today's show. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen each and every day. Thanks for all the calls and texts straight off that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line. Always appreciate them at 707-654-4693. Coming up on tomorrow's show, it'll be Crossover Thursday. It'll be Thursday already. That's wild, right? The week is almost over. We're almost thinking about this game against the Chargers at Allegiant Stadium. Well, since it's Crossover Thursday, that's exactly what we're going to be doing. I'll be talking to the host of Locked On Chargers, Daniel Wade, David Drogemeyer. We'll be talking all things Chargers and Raiders. We'll talk about storylines. We'll talk about matchups, and we'll talk about game flow, how the game could be won or lost by both teams. So it's all coming up on Crossover Thursday. Again, thanks so much for making the show your first listen each and every day. Remember, you can find the Locked On Raider podcast free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. Just about at 2,000 subscribers already, so definitely appreciate that. Ari's doing a fantastic job. I know my man knows how much I like to be a perfectionist, and so he's really doing everything he can to make sure that the YouTube is where it needs to be, and he continues to improve it each and every day, so I definitely appreciate him for that. At Ari Produces on Twitter. Make sure you check him out. So tomorrow will be Crossover Thursday, Raider Nation. Take care of yourself. Take care of your family. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.